We're going to be looking at some insights from research and practice about reading aloud and how it aligns with the science of reading. We'll look at some of Room to Read's professional development offerings. We are not a one-size-fits-all. We have a menu of options that range from reading workshops for certified teachers and librarians. We do workshops for families, caregivers, preschool teachers, and summer camp counselors. So we have a range of professional development initiatives. And then finally, we'll look at how our read-alouds and discussions foster children's well-being and literacy growth. So I'm going to pass the mic now to my colleague, Karen.
Thank you. Well, just a little bit of background about Room to Read. When Room to Read first started, actually was in Nepal, where we started providing picture books to children to help in their literacy development. Since then, we have been able to do work in 28 different countries. We have served over 50 million children. This includes the United States in this initiative. Thank you. We'll look at the United States. We have been able to reach 44 states so far. We're hoping to reach all 50 states. This have been through various literacy initiatives. This one right here actually highlights our book distributions. We're also a nonprofit publisher of children's books, and we're able to publish books that are needed in the market, and then we distribute them to our partners at no cost. And in Tennessee, so actually we have a wide range of partners in Tennessee. We're always looking for more ways to be able to collaborate with different communities based on their needs. This one here is actually, if you guys are familiar with Ola Lakeway in Morristown, that's one of our partners there, where we're able to launch family literacy workshops. This one here is a picture from the Kelkert Foundation. They're based in Saudi Daisy. We've been able to do several workshops for librarians in the K-3 space. And go to the next one. Yep. And Room to Read, we have several literacy initiatives that we partner with organizations with. Some of those include our book distributions, which I briefly talked about. If you have any interest or need for books, definitely would love to continue that conversation with you. Also, our family literacy workshops. These are workshops that you can deliver to families. And we also have the Spark program, which Karen will be talking more in detail about. And one that I don't have up here, but I do want to mention, is also a 6-week summer programming. All of our programs come at no cost, and we provide grants to organizations that want to offer this type of programming. But that said, we know that these are the programs that we can offer. But if there's a literacy initiative that you're looking to launch in your area, but you need that financial support in order to do that, know that Room to Read is also able to help in that space. So would love to connect with you if there's something there that you would like to collaborate. And I will hand it over to Karen.
Thank you, Karen. There are non-Karens in Room to Read, just to let you know. I always say that this is the Karen that is leading the other Karens into the light. So yes, if just in case you missed it, if you came in a little bit late, our programs are at no cost. We're a non-profit, and we'd love to partner with you if we can be of service. We'd like, before I delve into our Spark Read Aloud professional development workshops, I'd like to just to get a sense of who you are and how you are literacy champions. Could you raise your hand if you serve children age 0 to 3, so very, very early literacy? Okay. Most of you. How about preschool? Oh, even more for preschool. Elementary school? Wow, just about every, great. Well, you came to the right breakout. Any middle school? Okay, middle school and high school. a few high schoolers. That's wonderful. I hope to have something for all of you in this presentation because we believe read alouds are important for older learners and their intellectual growth also. So we will have some examples and some evidence for you as well. So after, we will have a little bit of time for you to bring your insights and expertise into the discussion, but please do feel free to raise your hand at any time if you have any questions about anything that I say. So let's begin and look at some of the insights from research and practice about reading aloud. So in a few very large studies in the United States, across the United States and in Australia, they found that although reading aloud is generally accepted as something that's very good to do and very worthwhile, in practice, reading aloud is often considered a time filler or lacks instructional rigor. And one of the biggest studies in the US found that most reading aloud in classrooms falls short and some hinder learning. And so that's what we aim to disrupt with our reading workshop, read aloud workshops. So let's take a look at some of the research that we found most impactful and have informed our professional development offerings. Advances in neuroscience have allowed us to peek into those reading circuits in the brain. In this study from 2015, they looked at the brain connections and activation in preschoolers while they were being read aloud. And they found that children who had been read aloud to more than others had more brain activation in language, story understanding, and mental imagery. In a follow-up study 2 years later, they found that better reading quality led to more child brain activation, especially in the areas of expressive and complex language, social and emotional processing, and working memory. Now, we might ask, what is this thing, reading quality? And so, of course, there's many studies been done on that. One that we like to point to is one by Dr. Kate Nation, whose team did studies on the language in children's books and language that children are exposed to. And they found that book language, and especially authentic text language, following on from the professor that we just heard from earlier. We're talking about authentic text language here rather than decodables. That language is more varied, more informative, more complex than spoken language, and more varied, informative, and more complex than child-directed television programs or videos. So they compared the language in television shows similar to Sesame Street, and they found that book language has this more varied and expressive language. I know our literacy champions are familiar with Dr. Scarborough's Reading Rope. This is Room to Read's interpretation of Dr. Scarborough's Reading Rope. We know that children need the meaning part, the language comprehension. We know that they need the word recognition, the decoding skills. At Room to Read, we also know, and I think many other organizations are working on these kinds of inputs also, is the attitudinal factors. What makes a child want to learn to read, to want to pick up a book? This internal motivation to stick with reading even when reading feels frustrating to them. What is it? And so we definitely look at these factors as well in our workshops. And then this research study published in Young and Hasbrook's book last year is really, I think, resonates with me a lot. It shows how easily we learn to read, and it looks like about half of us pick up reading fairly easily, whereas the other half require more explicit instruction. I know this resonates with me because my sister and I were definitely in this side where we seem to pick up reading without much instruction, whereas our brother, raised in the same household with the same books, the same environment, was definitely somewhere on this side. And he really struggled in school because of that, because we didn't know then what we know now about reading. And so this is just really important, we think, for when our participants are teaching children to know that, especially, for daycare counselors, summer camp counselors who maybe haven't had the literacy training that certified teachers have had, for them to know that our brains are wired differently and we need to keep children feeling as if reading is for them, even when they are struggling to learn to read. And we can do that with read alouds and discussion, keeping them part of our literary community and making them feel that they have something to offer to the literary community. So I'm just going to pause now, and because we are a little bit tight on time, rather than turning and talking at your table, I'm just going to ask if anyone would like to share anything that resonates with you about the research studies that I've shared so far. Yes. Right.
But to have even them be like, oh, I know this part, and they laugh and they're engaged.
Yes, there is something really special, right, when you have, there's an extraordinary silence, right, in the best read alouds, where children are at the edge of their seats. Thank you for sharing that. Read alouds are so important. And then the discussions that we have about, that, first of all, that engagement, hooking them in, and then those discussions that we can have about the book to get to the meaning piece and build up those habits of mind to find meaning, and we'll get to that as well. All right. All right, so now I'm going to talk about Room to Read's core model. As I mentioned, we have a menu of options, but there are some core principles that run through all our programs. But at the beginning of our workshops, we like to ask our participants how they feel about reading. From 0, I would do almost anything to avoid read alouds, or right up to 5, reading aloud is the highlight of my work day. And as I said earlier, there's a general consensus that reading aloud is good, and we should be happy about reading aloud. But it is surprising that not everybody feels that way, and we don't want them to feel ashamed about feeling that way. We want to bring them along. So wherever they are on this scale, whether they really do not like reading aloud or whether they absolutely love it, we want them to leave our workshops with a sense that their confidence and skills have grown and can continue to grow. So we begin our workshops like this. If it's a webinar, we might do like a Padlet or one of the online tools. And then we can also do this at the end of the workshop to see how the workshop has impacted and benefited them. So I've mentioned the 3 core skills of reading aloud. First of all is that connection. and building that enthusiasm in the adults, right? Having connection, enthusiasm, because that is contagious. And when our participants, when the adults are enthusiastic about books, they will pass that on to children. And also having a sense of curiosity about children's books. Children's books have become quite sophisticated, have you noticed? That often they have a dual audience, an audience for the child and an audience for the adult. And the more that we look carefully at the text and the pictures of children's books, the more we see and the more we can discuss and find meaning. We also will talk about the performative aspect of children's books. For some of us, especially if we love reading and have grown up loving reading, this part comes naturally. But I've come across many people for whom that is not the case, that they do not really relish picking up a book and reading aloud. And so for them, we want to improve their skills in and making them feel more confident in the performative aspect of reading aloud. And then finally, the third element of our reading program is to model what fluent readers do and to spark conversations about the book where multiple perspectives are included and where curiosity flourishes. So we typically will start our read aloud workshops with a demonstration. I might pick a seasonal book or a local book, but I will, or the trainer, if it's not me, we will start with a read aloud demonstration. And we ask our participants to notice. First of all, we want them to sit back and enjoy the experience, but we also want them to notice, what does the trainer, what did I do to help learners understand and enjoy the book? What did I do with my voice? Where did I pause? What were my facial expressions? Anything else? And then we consider and we brainstorm what kind of questions or prompts adults might or children might ask about the book, the theme, the pictures, the language, connections, trying to get that personal connection with the book and beyond. So I mentioned the performative aspect of read alouds, and this poster really helps those who are reluctant or feel shy about reading aloud. Some small things that we can do with our voice. Making expressions with our eyes is really important, bringing the emotion out of the story. And one of my favorite things to do is to ask children then to make that expression and turn to one another and share that expression. That is really important as well for children who might be on the spectrum, but we don't know it yet. But just being able to identify emotions and what that looks like, it's really helpful. And then how do we use pauses? The drama of the turn of a page in a picture book can really bring about those extraordinary, suspenseful, silent moments that we want children to fall in love with when it comes to reading. We do a lot of turning and talking, or also known as think, pair, share. Which do you use? Do you use turn and talk or think, pair, share? Both. People use both. We do a lot of this because we know that it encourages a variety of responses to the book. It increases participation and engagement. It values children's opinions about books, whether they are readers or not. It teaches real-life skills for conversations and improves teacher or counselor knowledge about their students. We know that it's a tried and tested instructional strategy that works across ages and across subjects. And so when we talk about encouraging a variety of responses, those discussions might include anything from the vocabulary, the theme, the background knowledge, those personal connections. What does the book mean for me? What does it mean for my neighbor? What does it mean for the world? Author's purpose, art, and language. And of course, one of the most powerful things that we found in these discussions is that misconceptions might bubble up. And in this warm environment, and when we have the book as an anchor, we can often overcome those misconceptions as well. And it might just be a misunderstanding about a word. It might be a misunderstanding about a stereotype. You don't know what's going to bubble up in the conversations, but having the book as the anchor can really help to facilitate some really rewarding, productive, meaningful conversations. So we have created a document, and if you would like to have a look at it, you can scan the QR code there, but you'll see that it is arranged in 3 sections, aligning with Bloom's taxonomy. So the first section is just that engagement piece, questions about what happens in the book. Then there's the connection, questions that connect the ideas in the book to real life or to other books. And then at the highest level of Bloom's taxonomy, we've got evaluation, questions for creative and critical thinking. And again, that QR code will take you to that document, or if you contact me or Karen at the end of the presentation, we'll be happy to email that to you. So we do think about our audiences and the children that our participants serve, and there might be follow-on activities and different activities on how we respond to children's books. So I think we've got some librarians, public librarians in the audience maybe, who know this very well and know the story time activities. And by the way, we really encourage our participants to make friends with their local public library and really take advantage of all the resources there. But we do some activities on different responses to books, especially talking about those conversations with props and puppets. Because if I have a conversation with a puppet, that puppet can say things that I can't. It is really a way to elicit deeper conversations and really getting into some deeper, sometimes difficult conversations. But with a puppet, you can do that often in a different way than the teacher voice or the adult voice, but using a puppet to say something can be a different slant on reading aloud. And so this is an example of a book that we use quite often, First Laugh, Welcome Baby. Does anyone know this book? It's a beautiful book about a Native American, it's the Diné family, and they talk about their tradition of being the first one to make the baby laugh. And so it resonates with all cultures because we all have different ways of welcoming babies into our communities. But the type of conversations that this book can foster can lead to it from landforms, natural resources, taking care of babies, family traditions, jobs, and laughter. Especially, I remember reading this book to a preschool group, and I asked the group at the end of our conversation, why is laughter important? And one 4-year-old said, because it's good for the soul. So, you know, sometimes the wisdom and the philosophy that comes from the youngest children is just amazing. So we're skill based, so rather than scripted. So we want our participants to be able to follow the conversational trajectory when needed. Or sometimes you need to bring it back, because if there's a puppy in the book, every child wants to tell you about their puppy. That's when to bring it back. But sometimes the conversational trajectory will lead you to some really important areas, things that matter in big ways to children. So again, we look at skills and ways to really elicit responses to the book and then follow the conversation about the book. So that is just a really rapid overview of our core model of reading aloud. And so I just want us to reflect upon a couple of questions for the room. Any reflections upon read-alouds that you've witnessed? How do they support literacy development? Is there anything that we have missed when we're talking about read-alouds that might be important? We'd love to draw on your insights and expertise. And is there anything that you're wondering about our core model? We're about halfway through our presentation, so I'll give you have about 3 or 4 minutes to talk at your table about how read-alouds are used in your organization. I have a question at the back.
I was just going to add that I do baby story time. I'm one of the librarians. So
Yay.
one of the things, even doing read-alouds to babies, I just read this beautiful thing. Oh, sorry. I read this beautiful thing about how important it is to do read-alouds even to babies, because then when they see their caregiver connecting with a book, that book equates love. So then they just start equating books with love, and that's a cool thing, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, you're so right. Just bringing those warm experiences, and children that have not had those experiences might not think that reading has anything for them, or might develop negative feelings towards reading. And reading aloud is one way that we can counter that. Right, yeah, for sure. Thank you. And shout out to the librarians. Thank you so much. As I say, we always ask our participants to connect with their local public libraries, because we know that you are a wealth of resources. Thank you.
I was just going to add, as an educator and literacy researcher, that I've done a lot of work in like reading comprehension, working with a little bit older kids like kindergartners, first graders, but even just like the Turn and Talks and the Think, Pair, Share, trying to help teachers feel confident about how to kind of model or teach comprehension. Even those little small things are super helpful for kids to learn how to think when they're reading. So it's really helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, the Think Aloud. And in our next session, we will share some of the strategies. And sometimes it's just a small thing that really makes a big difference when we're having conversations. So we'll share a little bit more later as well.
Yes, so I taught middle school. And believe it or not, middle schoolers love read-alouds. And I taught younger grades, but never in my life have I seen 6th graders light up when you're like, all right, I'm going to read to you today. And they sit there and they listen, and then you give them an assignment, and you're like, all right, you are going to read the next chapter with your group, and then you're going to do like a little book club, because it gets them engaged, and then they get to do it on their own. And that kind of helps with any stereotypes that you have if you are not such a strong reader, or if you're an excellent reader and you're shy. But like, those older kids still need to be read to. Like,
yes, absolutely. Yeah, I heard some absolutelys over there as well. So we will be talking a little bit about some books that we can use with older children, and some evidence as well that we found of using books with older children.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what she said. I'm a school librarian at a pre-K through 8th grade school. So, and I wanted to piggyback off the middle school age kids, because I could read something like a picture book to like K1, 2, and I could turn around and read the same picture book to older kids. And it's a totally different experience. And there is so much power in picture books for older students, and you're never too old for a read aloud. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely to that as well. So much power in picture books, and inviting children to be part of the meaning-making process which I think we're going to get into a little bit more about that as well. I just wanted to see if there's any other comments, insights, expertise. Love this group. Thank you.
This made me think of my time as a classroom teacher. I always talked about read alouds, and I would do parent workshops when I became a literacy specialist for the community and talk about read alouds. But this was all well before I had my own child. And so once I had my son, my mom would laugh at me because our bedtime routine from the time I had him involved a read aloud. And I would read to him because my goal was that things that I had taught other people about, I wanted him to develop a love for literacy, a love for reading. And he's 4, and he will choose a book versus screen time. And so talking to parents to say, you're never too young. The kids are never too young to start reading. If you start, the earlier you start with reading aloud, and I'm talking about with parents, we talk with teachers, but I think that home component is really important, so that kids won't say, oh, I don't want to read a book and I'd rather be watching TV or I'd rather be on my iPad. You start really early, and they also see that it's important to the parent, but then they also, for the kid, they develop a love for reading. So as much as possible, I always think about talking to families or talking to parents about if you are making that part of your nighttime routine or just sometime at home reading to your child, they will develop a love for reading.
Thank you. That is so important, is reaching out to families and community members. And I think, Karen, we have some community initiatives that work on the family piece as well. Was there another hand over here?
Hi, my department, they license child cares and adult daycares. So some of our child cares have some of the children go read to the adults. So you all would be like surprised, like the 18, it's a lady like 90 some years old. I meant the enjoyment they get from the little kids coming to read them. So we integrated as well with the adults.
I love that. So I don't know if everyone heard that, but you've partnered seniors, older adults with, is it aftercare? Childcare. Love that. Love that. Yeah, that is... that is what I bet they do love it, for sure. Yeah.
This is more an anecdote, but that was a beautiful example. We sometimes invite some of our graduated students back to come read, and we had a child who had actually leveled up in 2nd or 3rd grade, come back as a confident reader. And when they were reading to the class they were reading to, began with, "When I was your age," and then read one of their favorite books that they had experienced in that class. And I just think it's really powerful when they get to be the expert. And I love that example of reading to older adults.
Thank you. Yeah, book buddies. So, there's one here and there's one there. So thank you. I'll go here.
I just started a position at a library, but for the past 6 years, I was at a nonprofit, and before that, an educator, but worked with urban students in Knoxville, many of who came with a very negative association to reading, and it was kind of like a battle sometimes. And so that was my number one thing to preach to to the adults that were working with them, is that we have to create a positive environment for reading. But I did a Get to Know You activity before modeling a read aloud for one of our sites, and I asked the kids to step in. They were supposed to step in if it applied to them. Step in if you love reading, and one student out of the circle stepped in. And then I said, step in if you like to be read to, and every single child stepped in. And I think that was my revealing moment of how powerful read alouds can do to shift the perception, and it also create that social emotional safety of just being in a part of something that creates that safety. And so a lot of my staff who were not educators would often try to push older kids to read to themselves or do popcorn reading and thought read alouds were overrated. And I just kept preaching like, no, they're good for everyone. Our kids need them. Here's all the skills. So I feel like I could pass this, what we're learning today, on to my coworkers still back at my old job to say, here's some more research. So.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I do find when I'm talking to public school educators in Virginia, where I live, is that teachers are finding that there is less and less time in the school day for read alouds. And so the community initiatives that many of you spoke about are so more important than ever. But also, I think what you just talked about is that personal connection that read alouds afford. And one of the other big hot topics that educators are talking about now is AI, and how we're going to use AI in education. And I think when AI has taken everything that is AIable, what's left over will be truly valuable. And it's that human connection. And it's those connections that this read alouds and books can really bring forward. So I think that there is going to be, I hope, a resurgence of the value of reading aloud. Did you have your hand? Yeah.
I just had a question. I was reflecting on the fact that especially many of our new teachers, they struggle with that performance piece, and there's a bit of stage fright in that process. So I really just had a question around, and maybe it's going to be answered later, but a question around how to support teachers in becoming performers within their reading process to support that literacy.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I'm just going to click on back to that slide where we had this. So this is a graphic that it is open to anybody who takes our reading workshops. And first of all, what we do is model. We model a read aloud, and we model it in a way that, you do not have to be, it does not have to be an Oscar-winning performance. You don't have to be Dame Judi Dench. But there are small things that we can do with our voices. We will give our participants plenty of practice with authentic text, and we'll ask them to go and look for the emotion in the text, look for the drama in the text. What can you do? What small changes to your voice can you do, whether it's fast, slow, loud, soft, high or low, to lift that meaning off the page? Same with facial expressions. So our workshops have a lot of hands-on activities, and they are hands-on with picture books and practice in there. And we also, I hope, give them the skills that grow. The more they do it, the more competent they become. The more that they use turn and talk, the better they know their students, and therefore their practice improves. The more connections they make, the more books that they will then be able to find to connect with their students. So we're a skill-based program, and definitely within our workshops, we give participants plenty of time to practice, because you're right, they don't teach this stuff in college.
So I do a lot of read alouds. You won't get this on a first read. So when you're reading stories to students, especially, they talk to us about doing a lot of prep work, practice, practicing what you do before you get in front of the students. But sometimes, like, you will be reading something that you've just read for the first time, right? And so you go and you starting to read it, and then you get to the part where it said, she said angrily. It's like, oh, well, if you remember when we were in school, the metacognitive thinking, you're thinking about your thinking. Well, okay, talking to the students, hey, she said she said that angrily. So I'm gonna go back and reread that, because now I've got to do it like that. And so that's just really teaching the students as well how to do that. It's okay to go back and reread it. Good readers do this. Fluent readers do this. And so we do those things to kind of make it livable for them.
Yes, absolutely. And we do say that make your mistakes visible. Rarely does anyone read a book perfectly the first time. And so if you skip a word, if you miss a line, go back and say, oops, that didn't make sense to me. Let me read that again. Exactly. That's exactly what we ask our participants to do. The other thing I would say is when we first start out, choose books that you're enthusiastic about, which is why we bring lots of books to our training workshops. We want people to feel connection, enthusiastic about a book, so at least when they're starting out and starting with the routines, then they have a book that they feel very enthusiastic about.
You stole my idea. So I was just going to say that when I'm a librarian, when I am training new staff, I tell them to have fun. Don't forget to have fun with your read aloud, because that is going to come across to the kids. So pick a book that is fun to you. Pick a book that makes you laugh. Pick a book that maybe is boring to you and think, how would I make this more fun for myself? Because when you make it more fun for you, it's going to come across to the kids. The readers are going to become more comfortable in their shoes, and then they're slowly going to be able to eke their way out into a greater variety of things. But just starting out with what brings you joy as a reader, what brings you fun, and the kids are going to feed off of that.
Thank you so much. Great advice from a librarian. And so for the teachers who don't always have that luxury of always choosing a book that they find joy from, we do say at the beginning of the school year, get the routines in early, the read aloud routines in early, and practice those routines with books that you love, that brings you joy, because then once children come to expect a rewarding experience from that read aloud, then you can pick up just about any book and they will be very amenable and responsive. So yes, get your joy and your enthusiastic books in early. All right, I promised you some examples of from our menu of options about social and emotional learning, and about nonfiction and cross-curricular connections. But let's do the social and emotional learning. And what did we say? Fun and enjoyment first. Make sure you pick some books that are not overly didactic, that have that fun and enjoyment first. And here's a few examples of titles that are really fun and tested on thousands of children in reading as read alouds. I'm sure you recognize some of these. But understanding feelings, embracing differences and including others, resolving conflicts, resilience, and a growth mindset. So when we are doing our read alouds to promote well-being, we would really lean on that fun and enjoyment, but also bring in some other themes also. So this book, Sing, Don't Cry, for example, when we've used this in our read alouds, it can prompt some really inclusive conversations about what do you call your grandparents. We've gone to the themes of persistence and resilience, gifts and talents, including others, and the benefits of a bilingual brain. And these, when I first started reading this book aloud, these were not necessarily the themes that I had in mind as conversations, but these were themes that the children brought to the book. And so, and especially, this resonated with children who spoke Spanish in my community. Can I just have a show of hands? How many of you serve children who are an emerging bilingual, who are okay, English language learners? Okay, right. Okay, so we can focus on that in our workshops. We encourage our participants to model curiosity about language and words. What do you see? What do you notice? Ensure that our multilingual lingual learners get a chance to show what they know. We look at ways to say, turn and talk, whisper, partners. We also model the use of a random name picker, or also called equity sticks. Is anyone familiar with using? Some people are using these. So we wouldn't use them necessarily all the time. We use them after turn and talk when children have had a chance to respond and rehearse their idea with a partner. So this is really useful for children. You know, often emerging bilingual children understand more than they feel comfortable speaking. And so this way, when we give them a chance to turn and talk to their neighbor, then they get a chance to rehearse their language. But this also benefits students who are not bilingual. They get a chance to rehearse their idea, think through, and then we randomly pick their names after they've had a chance to rehearse and chat and talk about, and then share with the entire class. Now, we did talk about, I promised you little strategies. One, when we were teaching teachers to use these, we find that they would pick a name and immediately say the name. Here's a strategy. Pick a name, make eye contact, make sure 100% of brains are engaged, because they don't know whose name you've just picked out. We want every single brain engaged and thinking about what was the conversation I just had with my partner and what am I going to say. So pause rather than just pick the name out and say it out loud. Pause, make that eye contact. It's one of those tiny little refinements that make a big difference in engagement and participation. I wanted to share this example from the book Sing, Don't Cry. In this example, we'd read that it's a very short book. So we often get asked, when do we need to stop and or can we read through? With this short book that has a beautiful, almost lyrical quality to it, I typically will read it straight through because it's a short book, but there's no one right way to do this, and then go back to certain pages or go back to certain points in the story depending on the reaction of the students. So in this page, I stopped and asked my students to turn and talk to one another about what they noticed. This is a first grade class. And what I was hoping they would see is that the grandpa is thinking about this image here in the beige colored box. The girl is thinking about maybe when she lost a teddy in the pink box, and the boy, it seems to be thinking about when he was left out on the football field. And so I was hoping that, you know, children would be talking about that, and then they would bring this, because of course this is one of the beauties of picture books, is that the text will say one thing, the pictures will say another, and then that invites the reader in to make meaning, and we are all about meaning making with reading. And so we'd done the turn and talk, and then I picked out the name of a boy who had just arrived here in the US, and he was a little shy about speaking out loud. So I asked him to come and point to what he saw, and he pointed to this image of somebody crying. And so he taught us the word for cry. He did the symbol, and then he taught us all the word for cry in his language. He's from Italy, so we learned the word for cry in Italian, and then we all repeated it. And that made such a difference to his confidence from then on in feeling that he had something to bring to the class. And so, yeah, I just want to share that example. Also, if you have many Spanish speakers in your communities, there are so many words in English and Spanish that share common roots, cognates, and inviting students to notice them and pick them out. For example, in this book, Chrysanthemum, there's several English to Spanish, Spanish to English roots there. Also, we look for books that encourage us to say words in different languages and words that mean the same or nearly the same. Typically in October, we might do a series of books that are around the theme of being scared. For example, The Gruffalo, a very hairy, scary story. And we might think about words that mean the same or nearly the same as scary. And then somebody said nervous. We're like, is nervous the same as being scared? And we can have that discussion. So we're getting into complex vocabulary and meaning making when we do that. I mentioned earlier when to follow the conversational trajectory, and this is a delightful book for the first day of school about a father who is seeing his young boy. They've just moved to a new area, and the boy goes off to school for the first day, and I thought we would be talking about first day nerves at school. But no, my 5th graders noticed, picked up on stereotypes and the way that advertisers and media messages are aimed at children. And that was the conversation that my 5th graders had about this book. They surprised me when we did that book. We also really love wordless books and nearly wordless books, especially for inviting children to generate ideas, generate sentences, to be the author. And so we'll do some work with wordless books. That was social and emotional learning. We've got just a little bit of time left reading across the curriculum. I'm going to whiz through these, but we do look at the different types of nonfiction and invite participants to look at which would make a good read aloud and which would not. Typically, the narrative nonfiction are the best for read alouds, but they can be paired with other types of nonfiction. So these are 3 biographies. The 3 at the top are narrative nonfiction. The 3 at the bottom are expository nonfiction, but they will have additional information like timelines, like maps, like headings, all those things that are in the curriculum that young children need to learn. We can pair different types of nonfiction in our read alouds. Don't need to read the exploratory ones from cover to cover, but we can use them to enhance the conversation that we're having. This was a biography about Gandhi with my 5th graders. I think I chose this because it coincided with Diwali, but they surprised me with the connections. They compared Gandhi to Dr. Martin Luther King. They brought up the US Revolutionary War and those Brits that kept taxing them. In India, it was the salt tax. So we had that conversation. What happened when I used the random name picker, the quieter students, the students that are less likely to raise their hands, came up with some of these connections, like science and evaporation. What we love about the random name picker is that it encourages those more perceptive students to speak more, and the more talkative learners to listen more, and we get those conversations can really go in surprising but very rewarding directions. Sometimes we use turn and talk to check vocabulary. So, for example, with older students, we might say, look at the words here, turn and talk to your neighbor, and say, which of these words do you know or think you know? And then use turn and talk to check, and then that way you find, again, you learn about your students, what they know, what they don't know, and also can get into some different meanings of a word that might be confusing for them when we read the book. For younger students, you can do the same thing, but with pictures. So the over and under ones, you can show them pictures. What do you know? It's amazing some of the obsessions that younger children have about nature and how much they know, and then inviting them to teachers. We can use, I see I have 5 minutes, so I'm going to really skim over the next few slides, and I do want to give some time for questions as well. Anticipation guides, we've used those with nonfiction. Again, if you want any more information about this, I'm happy to respond with more information by email. Genre discussions. This is a great picture book for older students. It's how Mary Shelley wrote the novel Frankenstein. And we can have a really good conversation there about genre, which is on the curriculum. And there's not one right answer. That's the beauty of this. There's not one right answer. But when we have the conversation about it, we can model using evidence from the text to support our opinion. And there's not one right answer, so we can have those great conversations. We love to do work with primary sources. This is a fantastic book about a spy called James, who was pivotal in the Revolutionary War. And what we love about this one, in the front of the book, there is a picture of the Declaration of Independence. At the back of the book, there is a copy of General Lafayette's letter to the governor of Virginia advocating for his freedom. So really, really a great springboard into how we know what we know from this great story. The Library of Congress has some amazing resources with primary sources, and if you'd like to book one of our workshops on picture books and primary sources, just reach out. Oh, next year is a pretty important year for the US, 250 years. This book, Colonial Voices, Hear Them Speak, would be a really great read aloud. It's a book of poetry that is set on the day of the Boston Tea Party, and it follows an errand boy, Ethan, around Boston. He's kind of like a spy wearing an invisibility cloak. But after the voice of each person, we ask our students, was this person a patriot? Were they a loyalist? Or were they somewhere in between? Maybe because they were neutral, maybe they didn't care, maybe they didn't know, or maybe they wouldn't say. And then at the end, we would wrap up how many voices were in that book, how many men, women, Native Americans, enslaved Americans, free Africans. Let's think critically about the voices in that book. And I did want to share, because we live in an evidence-driven educational climate, we did research on this book, and we invited teachers to observe a read aloud and an activity, and the teachers then responded and filled in a survey about how this read aloud and the activity taught their students. And they found that this read aloud helped their students to draw conclusions about the text, make inferences. These are all reading skills from the reading curriculum from the state of Virginia. This study was done in Virginia. And they also were asked, to what extent does this book aid historical thinking when used in this way? Again, drawing from the curriculum in Virginia on that. So I would say, if you need evidence for read alouds because of the apparent decline in read alouds in some areas, this is a great one to think about for next year. And I think I'm just about out of time, so I'm going to just skip over our last slides and invite you to contact either Karen or I for any more information. We'd love to partner with you either for a book distribution, a read aloud workshop. If you could take our survey, we'd love to hear from you as well. That's typical, a typical survey that we use to improve our workshops. And thank you so much.
Real quick. Sometimes when we tell people about Room to Read, or Karen and Karen tell people about Room to Read, you're like, ooh, it's not really free, there's a catch, or it's too good to be true. It is not. It really is at no cost to you. High quality. You see what Karen does. I attended the training in Chattanooga. I don't know if you remember. And in the room were public librarians, school librarians, and some after-school providers, right? The one at Kelcourt or with Kelcourt. And it was a 5-hour thing, more in depth of what she went over today. So many of you in here are those who would plan professional development and training for others. Please contact Karen and Karen. It really is high quality at no cost to you. And that sometimes in our field isn't always necessarily the case. So I wanted to give that plug.
Thank you so much, Heather. I did recognize you. I thought, where do I know? Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. Again, Karen and I are standing by to answer questions, and we'd love to partner with you if we can be of service. Thank you.